Hello, and welcome to another inspiring episode of the Entrepreneur Speaks podcast, the podcast that brings you the voices behind some of the most innovative and purpose-driven ventures around the globe. I'm your host, Kofi Anyemedu. Today, we are diving into a conversation that blends heart, strategy, and innovation in a truly unique way. Joining me is Stephen Sakach, the founder and CEO of Zero Company, a marketing agency that's redefining how brands connect with their audiences, not just through data, but through empathy, purpose, and what Stephen calls bliss. Stephen's entrepreneurial journey is one of resilience, vision, and authenticity. From the heights of client wins to the lows that tested his resolve, he's built a company that believes marketing isn't just about conversion, it's about creating meaningful experiences, communicating with kindness, and building businesses with love, not just algorithms. In this episode, we'll explore how to create wow experiences that turn clients into loyal ambassadors, how bliss and kindness can be powerful tools in business, and why the best brands get connection right. We'll also unpack how AI and human-centered marketing can coexist to build businesses that truly matter. So whether you're a founder, marketer, or simply someone looking to build with purpose, this episode is for you. Let's dive into the story of Stephen Sakach and the magic behind Zero Company. Welcome to my show, Stephen.
Hey, Kofi. Glad to be here. This is going to be fun.
All right. So to start our conversation, can you tell us a bit about your background and what really inspired you to start Zero Company?
Yeah, so I can go way back to the days before internet. I think even in college we were, studying analytics and how people read newspapers and things like that. So this is, back in the print days when that's how information was primarily consumed, and I was trained to be as a reporter. And then the internet comes along and everything turns digital. For me, is just seeing how search was become this dominant thing, like Google and all these. And this is where I realized, there's a lot of opportunity here. No one knows where it's going to go. And then as soon as the advertising started integrating with search, I was like, okay, this is the future. This is going to be the next decade or two. And certainly fast forward, that's where we are now. It's like Google's very dominant with all the data. And way back when, we used to have to pass around a disk to get analytics, but everyone has their phone now, and this thing's tells you so much about what a person's doing, where they're going, what their interests are. And it's really kind of fascinating how much marketing has evolved during that process. And sometimes things can be a little creepy with the phone and the kind of data that you get. So we really try to figure out where's the ethical boundaries and, what's too much information to know about a person. Because, a lot of marketers are the more the better. But it can tell you a lot about a person. So this is how we kind of work is trying to figure out, someone's product and how it's relevant to someone else. And we want to do that a little differently than others, and that our approach really is around kind of higher purpose and building meaning into what you're doing.
All right. So let's talk about your company and its beginning. But to start off, let's start with the name. I'm always fascinated about the story behind names, especially the story behind company names. So your company is known as the Zero Company. Why that name Zero Company?
Yeah, it goes back, we probably bought that domain way back, 20-something years ago, 25 probably. But it goes back to, there was this Gandhi quote about humility, and all my life I strive to be zero. And so it's basically this grounding yourself in, being humble and working from there. And so that's kind of the importance of the zero for me personally, is just to start from this base of being humble and how can we grow from there and be open to growing and, exploring things like radical love in marketing.
So still talking about your company. So what was the moment that really made you take that leap from the idea to execution?
Boy, there's probably several steps in that journey, I think, too. I do remember like the first time I ran like just a paid search ad back in the day. It was this unnerving experience where you're going out there and you're saying, okay, I'm going to put up an ad and anyone can just click on it and it's going to hit the cash register for me again and again. And it's like, well, let's just try this, see how it works. And I remember like spent like $3 or $4 and got a sale for something, made like $20 on that, and I'm like, oh, you could scale this really easily. And so just jumping right in and playing with that. Early days of Google search, it wasn't even Google back then, it was there's a company called goto.com that invented this pay-per-click process, and they became Overture, and they were bought by Yahoo, and then Google and Yahoo battled it out. But back in the Wild West days, anything would go, and you'd be in these bidding wars with people. Especially around the holidays, you'd be on your computer 24/7 just battling for positioning on the search engines. It was a little bit of madness, but just taking that first leap and getting into that digital marketing space, because it was only maybe 2 or 3, 4 weeks old when we jumped in, when it was this first pay-per-click thing came along, and so taking that leap was a big one. And then there's another moment, I think, in my career where I'm really interested in like consciousness and studying higher consciousness. And I was at this event where we were talking about business consciousness and how oneness and integral theory and all these things and this, these concepts, and they're like, well, how do you plan on using that in your business? And I'm like, I just do a Google ad. How am I supposed to bring oneness and all this to that, right? But it was a question though that just kind of lingered throughout my career is, how do we bring these concepts of higher consciousness to what we do? And so keeping asking that question really led me to understand that it's all these other things around our company that we stand for. It's our employees and empathy with our customers and empathy with our employees and empathy with our community that we're in. And you start understanding these bigger picture type of things, and over time all that will eventually, in a way, could come out into that little tiny Google ad if you want, because this is a story about your company and how you find meaning in the world and your higher purpose. And so I think those, jumping in at first way back when, taking the risk of trying some digital marketing, but then really trying to figure out, well, how can we do digital marketing with a higher purpose and more meaning?
Okay, so I always say that entrepreneurship, as you know it so well, is not a walk in the park. There are a lot of highs, lows, and a lot of lessons you pick up. So let's start off by talking about your high moments. Can you share some high moments of this journey so far with us?
High moments. So I would think, I remember like around 8-9 years ago, articulating this concept of bliss, which we're going to get into, I think, and sitting in this conference room with our employees and kind of having this idea that is a little bit radical. So bliss for us stands for build, love, into scalable systems. And so we were at this point in our business journey where we're starting to scale, we're starting to systemize things, and there are growing pains when you're doing that, right? And, I didn't want us to lose our culture, which was really based around empathy and love. And so it was like, at this key stage for companies, how can you really focus on what matters most while you're scaling? And so I articulated this concept of bliss, so build love into scalable systems. How can we build this? And so in this staff meeting, just kind of throwing it out there, and I have no idea how this is going to be received by the company and everything. It's like one of those, was I up at midnight just coming up with a crazy concept or something? Afterward, I just got all this response from everyone in there. And even one of the employees said, this is why I'm staying here, is because of this kind of thing. And so this was just a huge kind of, you could say, aha moment, I think, for us was understanding, hey, what if we keep asking how we can build love into our business in different ways? And that really started that journey for the past 9 years. So that's been kind of one of those key moments for me as an entrepreneur, is really diving deep into radical love and empathy and how we build that into a business. Certainly some things didn't work, but we all try and keep it organic, what works with each other and our staff and what doesn't. And so that's been pretty life-changing. If we want to get to the low points, thinking about the low points was prior to this, when you'd go to work daily, I could feel the grind a lot, right? Like you just felt the weight of everything you're doing and kind of the slog, the day after day thing. And I think the real reason for feeling all that was that it was hard for me to find the meaning and fulfillment in what we were doing at the time. But until we took this real empathetic approach and understood our higher purpose, that's when suddenly all the energy came back, right? And it's really, we didn't do anything different as far as how we operated, but it was just this tiny mind shift change in how we viewed our business. And I think there are a lot of examples of that with people now that I've talked to over the years of how it's just this tiny mind shift that they made in their business, realizing maybe they're in service to others in some way, in some higher way. And that made all the difference for them in their entrepreneurial journey.
Okay, so you've talked about the highs, you've talked about the lows, but I know that on this journey you've picked up a lot of lessons. Can you share some of these lessons with us?
Yeah, I'd say turns out doing the kind thing, the good thing, is almost always the profitable thing in the long run, if you think about it that way. There's so much data out there now that shows that if you're taking an empathetic approach or a compassionate approach to what you're doing, kindness can really be this differentiator for you, for your business, where you can kind of stand out. And what happens in that process is you start to make emotional connection with your customers and your employees as well. And your employees are going to stay with you longer. You're going to retain your employees longer doing that. Your customers, there's data around this, is if you make an emotional connection with your customer on, kind of this higher level, you're going to have 306% higher lifetime value for that customer versus just a satisfied customer. Hey, I sold them this, they were satisfied with the product. But if I'm really able to go deeper and make this, emotional connection, which is usually around your higher purpose or kindness in some way, that person is going to stay with you longer. They're going to tell their friends about you. These are the people that are the real advocates for your business. And that's kind of the holy grail in marketing, is when your customers are doing the marketing for you because they've connected with you on an emotional way. So I think if you can get to that point where you can define your higher purpose in your business and use that, audit the heck out of your company according to that higher purpose, right? Say, hey, every little process, every little system we're doing, how does this work with our higher purpose in mind? And you get to that way, then you start becoming an authentic company around that higher purpose. And your customers will feel that. They will feel it all the time, and that's how you get to that emotional connection that I think is really important.
Okay, so you talk about creating experiences to wow and win clients. What does this really mean in practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things you want to do is, when we talk about these emotional connections, there are really like 17 emotions when someone's consuming a product or service. Some of those are negative, some of those are positive. What you really want is these positive consumption emotions to be involved in your products. There are things like that you can add to your company and your process that are like a surprise and delight kind of element, where you did something totally unexpected that someone wasn't even thinking was going to happen, and it delighted them. And now suddenly I've kind of elevated our relationship in a way. And so we've recently launched this AI software. It's the AI Chief Marketing Officer at AICMO.io. But one of the elements it has in there is sort of purple goldfish, purple cow. You may have heard those phrases, that kind of thing. It develops those kind of ideas for your business to where you can make these surprise and delight elements of your business doing something extra, something that someone didn't expect. It comes up with all kinds of creative ideas depending on what your business is. And it's designed specifically, though, to build that emotional connection and to really, ideally, it's tied around your higher purpose again, so that people understand, they really walk the talk. This is what they're about. And now they've amazed me. They've wowed me, with this little extra thing that they did for me that I wasn't even expecting. Okay.
So in your opinion, what do you think are some principles or values you believe are essential to consistently deliver wow experiences?
I think, first of all, kindness should be like one of those things. And this shouldn't be like a wow thing. It shouldn't be something that differentiates you in the world, but there's so much noise out there. There's so much just transactional relationships, right? Mm-hmm. That someone doing something that's a little extra kind that you didn't expect, that makes it kind of a wow thing. And I think, you and I could probably even think of just every now and then something like that happening with a company or a product or a service. Usually it's the person there just being nice, just being a nice person. This is who they are. And it's not necessarily like the company's system. It was just, this is a great person. They light up the room every time they go. When they leave, they take that with them. And they take those random acts of kindness with them. And so that's really when we think about bliss is, can we build these random acts of kindness? Can we make them a system of kindness so that the next employee in that same spot has kind of some ideas on how to treat the customer, or go the extra mile for the customer, or is empowered to do something loving or kind within their reach. And you start asking that question over and over again. I really do think kindness is one of the customer experience you'll find just kind of elevates your game. And so there is some data around this. 70% of buying experiences are based on how the customer feels they're being treated. I mean, that's a pretty big thing. And for leaders, I think it's kind of starts with you a lot of times. You got to kind of set the tone or set the systems in place, or help, people know that this is how you want to act. And there's data all around that. For companies that are known for compassionate leadership, they're seeing 41% higher customer satisfaction. So all this stuff trickles down, right? All this kindness kind of has this ripple effect. And I think if you start auditing your business for kindness, for empathy, for love, this is how you're going to find maybe even the higher purpose you didn't know you had.
So I still want us to dwell on your response, an aspect of your response, because you speak a lot about using bliss to transform customers into brand ambassadors. So what does bliss really mean in a business context?
I think a lot of things. So first, sometimes your first customer should really be your employees. Like this should be the first one that you're focusing on. Building that internal culture. Culture is often your product. You may not be aware of it, but culture is often your product. This is what, can separate you and your competitor. Very simply, maybe you're offering the same things, but your culture is something that sets you apart. So I think operationally, first start with all those internal systems, all those things of how you treat each other as employees. Be disruptive, because right now we're all thinking that this hierarchical, I'm the boss, I've got the managers, all that, that's the pretty typical standard form of company. But if you look at some of these next level purpose-oriented businesses, they blow up that structure. They make these self-managing teams so that people feel empowered and they can be leaders themselves when they need to and be followers themselves. And so look at everything internally. If you're asking what's the loving thing to do here, oftentimes you're going to find you're going to find your way to some of these same places and these great companies that have evolved consciously or where they're at. So first off, absolutely focus on yourself, focus on your leadership, focus on your staff or your company's emotional intelligence or their EQ, making sure that they understand what it means to be empathetic. Start with all that first and foremost. That's where I would say, if you're starting with bliss, look at all that stuff that you're doing. We do things in our company where we've got peer-to-peer giving, where everyone gets a little bit of allowance of a budget every month. And, they're using Slack and we're communicating. But when someone does something extra for them, does them a solid, they like send them a little bit of, call them bliss bucks for being nice and showing that kindness. And this is really this sort of way they can show gratitude to an employee. And this is how you build some of that teamwork in there. And so instead of, me being the head of the company, having to, be the one who says, hey, great job on this, and I'm the only one saying that all the time, that's just one torch. If I've got 40 people as a staff, 100 people as a staff, and now they're saying it to each other, that's, 100 torches, right? And they're all carrying it. And that really builds that culture from the inside out. And so that's where you want to start with that bliss, so that when you're going out with your message, you're authentic, you're walking the talk, you're about it, right? So work on yourself, in your leadership. If you're leadership, work on yourself. Your employees don't need to deal with your issues, your trauma, all that. That doesn't need to be revisited upon your employees. So work on yourself. That would be definitely a bliss approach to leadership, for sure. And then let's get you to tell a story about your business. It has a lot more meaning. And so again, that's like with our AI Chief Marketing software. We've got tools in there to help you with that purpose. Maybe you've never been asked these questions about your company, but it helps you think about your higher purpose and your purpose in the world and things you find meaning and fulfillment in. And so then once you've got that figured out, then we're going to come with some ideas for you on how to create campaigns and marketing around some of that higher purpose. But we do need you to kind of walk that talk, because otherwise, if you're just saying you're about something and you're not, that marketing will backfire on you badly.
You've also mentioned that marketing needs a kindness communicator. What really inspired this idea, and how does it reshape the traditional marketing approaches?
I think a lot of times, like right now, first off, we're the most marketed to generation ever right now. Like everyone has got a phone or something, and they're be constantly blasted. We're on social media. We're constantly blasted by images and stuff like that. And there's so much noise out there. And so much of that is just talking about, here's the features of our product, or here's the benefits, or buy this, buy that. How do you cut through all that noise? I mean, so, if you're just saying the same stuff everyone else is saying, you're just adding to the noise in the world. And a lot of times we know that can be even damaging. Like, I've got a daughter, and we know on social media all these images of what ideal beauty looks like can really impact young, there's been studies on all of that. And if you're an advertiser and you're putting that out into the world, you're just contributing to that. Whereas you've got, maybe someone like a Dove, they've got their Dove Real Beauty, where they're talking about what real beauty looks like. So they're spending millions and millions of dollars and putting out billions of ad impressions that are actually putting good and kindness into the world. And naturally, I think their stuff went viral because people like to share something that they find good, as well as the things that outrage them, right? The internet's all about, hey, this is what outrages me. This is what I'm mad about. You see that more than everything. Every now and then, though, you see something like, this was amazing. Look at how beautiful this is. Look how kind this is. And that can go just as viral. But I guess it's a harder story for people to tell, or it's a harder thing for people to share or find. So really, that's kind of what we want to do, is put more of that into the world, I think.
Okay, so still talking about this and how you utilize this in your company. So how does your company, your company Zero Company, how does it ensure authentic, lasting relationship with its customers and also your collaborators?
Yeah, I think, it's funny, we just got out of a meeting even just talking about this stuff, and what's one of our differentiators really is that culture of ours, so much based around kindness and understanding our customers on a deeper level. Yeah, they want to double their revenue, they want to cut their ad spend at the same time, but also understanding that if we do that, well, now this person's going to be able to send their kid to the school they want, right? Our client's going to send the kid to the school they want, or they'll be able to take that vacation that they've been dreaming about. And so that puts a little more weight on us to understand the importance of what we do. And I think there's a lot of agencies out there that don't go to that level, and they're just thinking, hey, yeah, here's all the numbers or whatever, call it kind of churn and burn, where they get a client in, and if they leave, whatever, as long as we keep getting more in. But for us, it's like we don't sleep at night if we know something's not going well, because we understand the ramifications of what it means to this person, to their family, to their relatives, there's a ripple effect on what we do. And if we do it right, we can impact that. And so we definitely make sure all of our account executives and managers kind of understand that relationship that they have, and try to build it on a deeper level. There are times when things go sideways in marketing. For instance, like the pandemic, right? Stuff happened. When you have that trust built up in these key moments, some of the best decisions can be made for your company. Like if things were going, we had a client that I'm like, hey, I know the revenue's looking bad, but all of our metrics are looking amazing. And they're like, okay, we believe you. Let's double the ad spend right now. They doubled it. They came out the other side of the, just a few months later, doubling their company's overall revenue. And we're talking billions of dollars here. But if we didn't have that trust built in before that and that working relationship, that would have been a huge missed opportunity for any other agency, I think.
In your earlier submission, you talked about AI and how you are utilizing it in your organization. I still want us to talk about that into a bit more details. As we all know, AI is changing the way we do our things, and it's changing the way we even market our things. How is your company leveraging AI in your campaigns? Can we talk about the earlier tool you talked about?
Yeah, I love talking about AI. So in the digital marketing space for years, like even a decade, we were using AI and machine learning, just in like the Google platforms and things like that. That's kind of what AI was for a while. And then a couple of years ago, we have the generative AI that comes in that just kind of changed everything. And so for us, we understood that whatever AI is going to do, it's going to amplify it. Like it's going to be, 10x or 100x, whatever you were doing before. And so for us, we're asking, hey, how can we build love into this? How can we put good into the world? How can we scale love? And so what we wanted to do was develop a marketing product that will, instead of us prompting it, it's going to prompt us to do the loving thing in our marketing, to find our higher purpose. So we're using it to coach us as marketers constantly. With our AI CMO, we've programmed in like 100 different expert techniques. So we're going to level up. I've been in marketing forever, but I don't know off the top of my head 100 different techniques for 100 different things. I know a lot, but it's just like there's so many, you're always learning, everything's fluid. But if you have a tool that says in plain language, hey, which of these things do you want to try on this campaign? These are all expert-backed things. So now AI is going to level up your expertise, right? At the same time, we want it to level up the good that you're putting into the world, the kindness that you're doing at the same time. So by asking you questions around that. So I really do think instead of, us prompting AI, what we really want is good AI to prompt us to be better humans. And I think we're seeing a little bit more of that, but it's pretty dang rare because everyone, they just want to use AI to optimize toward that sole thing of profit all the time. It's like, how can I make more money? Problem is if AI, from what we've experienced over the past decade, when you're telling it this is the one singular goal, it will do that at all costs, and it's not going to think about anything else. So now when we get into generative AI, maybe it's not going to think about your employees. It's not going to think about the environment or your community. It's not going to think about, these other business stakeholders out there. But it's going to think about profit. And if it's just optimizing toward that, it may not care about employees. It may not care about the environment, people, the planet. It may not care about anything else. So we want you to have AI that cares about kind of a higher purpose. So we want it to care about purpose, people, planet, and profit, all those things. And it can do that, and it can put that into its algorithm. So if we use it in a way where we're building love and kindness into it, it can do that if we let it. We just have to realize there's things we can do beyond profit when we're using AI.
Okay, so still building on the point you just made. As we know, we are all aware AI is here to stay. But how do we really strike that right balance between automation and maintaining that human, purpose-driven kind of voice in marketing?
Yeah, I always think of this as, can artificial intelligence make us more real in some way? And I see AI as kind of a jazz session, right? Where you've got a few people playing instruments. So it's me and the AI playing a couple different, and we're kind of riffing in this jazz session, and that it's co-creation. So I'm bringing my humanness, it's bringing its AI-ness, and it's prompting me, I'm prompting it, right? And so I think as long as you're bringing your humanness into the process, that's going to be a good thing. But if you're just on Chat GPT and you're asking the same question, hey, write a blog article for me for my carpet installation business, someone 100 miles away is like, I have a carpet business, write a blog article for me. These are going to be very similar, very not human kind of things. It'll just be the same old stuff, adding more noise out into the world without any meaning behind it. So with our software, that's what we're trying to do, is put some guide rails in there that's going to differentiate. Tell us what your higher purpose is. Let's figure out what your higher purpose is. Let's figure out how you're different from your competitors. Let's figure out how you like to speak and what your brand voice is like. Bring all these things in, and now let's come up with some creative ideas on a campaign that might resonate with you. And so we're going to come back, it'll bring back a whole bunch of creative campaign ideas, and you'll be like, okay, yeah, this one really resonates with me. Let's do this. And what it'll do is take that one campaign, using your voice, using your higher purpose, all those things, and build all these different things for your Google, for your blog, and your email, and all that. And ideally, that helps bring out the humanity in you in this process, versus just going to like the Chat GPT and doing that single prompt. This is going to bring out more of who you are in that jazz session. And so I think if we think about it that way, that we're prompting AI, but it's prompting us, and we want it to put more good into the world in our way, in how our business sees meaning. I think that's going to be probably one of the more human things we're going to see that could come out of all this.
Okay, so you've spoken about scaling businesses with love, not just data. What does that look like in action for you as a leader?
Yeah, so I try to keep like this list of all these things that we've done, that I would consider like bliss related things going on. And there are so many different elements to that from, I've talked about the peer-to-peer things to, we're now kind of a hybrid remote office, but it's where people can, work with flexible hours and things like that. There's all these little things you can be doing in your day-to-day business life, as long as you're asking that question, how can I build love into this? We have at the beginning of our staff meetings once a week where we talk about some gratitude, like, hey, we verbally say, hey, I want to shout out this person. They really helped me, do this one thing together. Or I saw this person do this other standout thing. These are little moments of stuff that helps build your company soul. This is what brings your company to life. If you aren't doing those things, if you're just running business as usual, this is how you get those soulless businesses that, right now, only 21% of the world's workforce population is engaged at work. So that means 4 out of 5 people just hate it. They hate going to work. They are not engaged. There's a percentage of those that are actively against you, even at work. So this is a huge problem. And the reason is because they don't find meaning and fulfillment in their work because they're treated like a cog. They're not empowered. They're not being seen or heard a lot of times. And I think when you're thinking about that concept of bliss, this is what's going to bring the soul back into your business. When we're thinking more about these relationships and this connection that we have with each other and understanding, what's going on in someone's life, personally and caring about them, and this is how you bring that back into that process. So, but right now, like I said, 4 out of 5 employees are just not engaged with work because of the way we've been treating it. I know from studying consciousness, I know what the future of business looks like because we've seen businesses that have this higher consciousness. We've seen the young people coming into business looking for meaning more so than previous generations. Because of the gravity of all the work we've put in, consciously and where we've evolved to, they're coming up so fast to that gravity that we've worked so hard to build. And they're going to be pushing the envelope even further. But they're coming into work looking for meaning, looking for something that speaks to them, looking for empathy and even love. We don't like to say it a lot in work, but they are looking for that love and that compassion and something that gives them meaning. So I really think, this is where you've kind of got to start if you want to bring that soul back into your business, if you want it to be more of a living organism versus this machine that just grinds away on people all the time.
Okay, so how do you sustain your company culture and also emotional intelligence while growing operations and also expanding your client base?
I think they're one and the same. A lot of times I think culture is your product. A lot of times you may not realize that. I've got just massive documents of how empathy in work and compassion in work, how it's actually the more profitable thing too. So if you're cold-hearted out there and you're thinking, this sounds like fluff. No, there's study after study after study that shows that you're going to be more profitable taking this approach. So, I think no matter what part of your business you're working on, just go to Google and just type in, how do I apply empathy to this situation? And you'll probably find some stats or data that's backing that up. So we're talking data, but we're talking empathy data, right? And that this empathetic approach is actually going to hit your bottom line in a positive way. So you can combine these two things of, being loving, being empathetic, being compassionate, because so many studies are just showing, time and time again that it's going to be the more profitable thing too. So if you aren't sure, you're not sure, you haven't done the EQ training at work as a leader and all those things that we talked about earlier. If you're not sure and you're just looking at this data points, well, there's data points for empathy being more profitable. So look it up, do it. Trust me on this. This is how you can grow your business. And so, like I said, they aren't mutually exclusive. They can help you grow and level up together, I think, and in a way that's more meaningful to you, I think, in the long run.
Okay, so we're just about wrapping up our conversation, but you've been on this journey for quite some time now. So looking back, is there anything you would have done differently on this journey?
Yeah, I wish I knew some of the stuff I just talked about, from day one. My grandfather, when he was 80, he kind of knew this, and I remember this conversation he had with me. This is toward the end of his life. He was all, no matter what you do in business, he said, do it with love, right? And so it just inherently spoke true to me But this is someone with 80 years of, work experience telling someone at the time who is probably, I don't know, in his 20s, and I understood it, but I didn't understand the levels and the nuance to like I do now on just how important it is, and with empathy and compassion, all those things, and how much meaningful my work will get. It finally got onto me, Grandpa. And so, but that took a while before I really understood the nuance of all that and how much better it made running a business, working with people, making impact in people's lives. All that stuff came out from that. But yeah, looking back, if I had the full 80 years of wisdom there and it resonated and hit that right tone and understood all the nuance, that would have been great. But I mean, that's what life's about, I think, is taking that journey, figuring it out along the way.
Okay, so we're just about wrapping up, but I always want to end my conversations with my guests sharing pieces of advice to our audience. And our audience, people in business, people with that desire to start, people kind of have, there's fear, so they are not able to take the bold step to be able to go forth and achieve whatever they have inside of them. So I would like us to share a few moments before I sign off with you offering pieces of advice. What would be your piece of advice to my audience before we sign off?
I think there's a couple things here. One of my personal values is courage, right? And so if you aren't willing to take a little bit of risk from time to time, to take that bold step, like you said, you're going to ask yourself later on in life, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I try that? A lot of success stories have 13, 14, 15 failure stories before they were a success. So don't be afraid to do it. The mere fact that you tried doing it is a success. And so understand that much, even if you failed. The mere fact that you tried is a success. The second thing would be if you want to leave a mark or a legacy, of some type. This is where I think you can do it, is with that bliss concept, is by if you build love into some kind of system around you. Whatever you're doing at work right now, you can ask yourself that question. Whatever you're doing in your life, is there a system where you could add just a little bit of love to that will run on its own when you're not even there? So this is a mark that you've left in the world in some way that is now having this ripple effect as it's touching people even when you aren't there. So do that once. Just do it once in your life, and then do it again and do it again, and keep finding ways to do that. And that's how you're going to leave a legacy with some kind of impact. And anyone can do that right now.
All right. So before I sign off, what will be your last words to my audience?
Last words to the audience. I'm going to say, think about radical love. What does that mean? What does that even mean? Think about just that concept. Ask yourself, what does radical love mean? Think about humility, being humble. Those two things together, if you're humble, this is how you're going to grow. This is how you're going to be open to things. And if you're loving, this is how you're going to grow healthy. If you're arrogant and you're not as loving, you're going to have some painful lessons in life, because love will find a way, and sometimes it's going to run up against your rigid response to things, and it's going to be painful. But for smooth sailing, be humble, be loving.
All right. Be humble, be loving. And these are the parting words of my guest, Stephen Sakach. Stephen, thank you so much for spending your time with us today and for sharing your rich experience with us on the Entrepreneur Speaks podcast. We wish you the very best.
Thank you, Kofi.
So this has been another exciting episode of the Entrepreneur Speaks podcast. I'll come your way next time with another inspiring episode. I remain your host, Kofi Anyemedu. As always, do take good care of yourself, and let's continue to keep hope alive. Cheers.
Dreams light up the sky tonight, builders of tomorrow shining bright. From every land they find their beat. Yeah, it's the entrepreneur speaks. Stories rise, visions fly, lessons learned, dreams run high. This is the entrepreneur speaks. The entrepreneur speaks. Oh, dream it, build it, speak it. The entrepreneur speaks. Entrepreneur speaks. Dreams light up the sky tonight, builders of tomorrow shining bright. From every land they find their beat. Yeah, it's the entrepreneur speaks. entrepreneur